White House senior advisor Stephen Miller says President Trump is right again as the White House now turns all their focus to affordability and America First policies. Illegal immigrants brought in under Biden is the top reason your life is so expensive. The White House is exposing this and will do everything they can to make life more affordable. But listen to what Stephen Miller had to say earlier today over on Fox News.
Discuss. We talk about test scores. Well, if you subtract immigration out of test scores, all of a sudden our test scores skyrocket. If you subtract immigration out of healthcare, all of a sudden we don't have nearly the size of the healthcare challenges our country faces. If you subtract immigration out of public safety, all of a sudden we don't have violent crime in so many of our cities. Issue after issue, we talk about these things that they just happen to us. The schools just suddenly fail. Violent crime just suddenly explodes. The deficit just suddenly skyrockets. These are a result of social policy choices that we made through immigration.
All right, there you have it. President Trump, his team, they're doing everything they can to make life more affordable. To help me go through this and other big stories, I have Drew Allen. Drew, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be here. Thanks, bro.
So Drew Allen is a friend of mine, an author, a publisher, a journalist. He has a show just like me. What are your thoughts on White House advisor Stephen Miller saying, you remove immigrants, illegal immigrants from healthcare, life gets better. Auto insurance, life gets better. Remove them from buying houses, renting, competing against Americans that need those residents, public safety, school. What are your thoughts on his bold statement there?
Well, it's such an obvious point that, frankly, people hadn't made so succinctly in a long time. You know, when you're talking about whether it's 10 or 20 or 50 million, illegals, and then whether they're illegal or legal, we're talking about mostly about illegal immigrants here. Look, we're not importing the A team from around the world. When people talk about the United States as a nation of immigrants, I mean, it gets into semantics for some people, but we're actually, it was a nation that was settled. There's a difference. And then the immigrants that previously came here, like at the turn of the 20th century, for example, from Italy and elsewhere, there was no welfare state. They came here because they loved America and they wanted to succeed. People aren't coming here to succeed and take advantage of opportunity. This new breed that's been coming here for a long time are coming here to take advantage of the welfare state and the handouts. And it's not the best of the world. I mean, one, we're not the world's trash can. Nobody has the right to come here. It's a privilege. And the goal of immigration is not to help the poor or the criminal around the world. It's to make this country better. And so it's exactly right. I mean, like he talked about schools, which I love that point. Look, I live in California. We have the most, we have one of the highest, if not the highest, illegal immigrant populations too. Legal as well, I suppose. It's hard to say when you're a sanctuary state and you don't differentiate or care and hand out driver's licenses and social security numbers. But anyway, you go to these schools and not only do you have uneducated parents and their children attending these schools, but oftentimes they don't even speak English. And so, this is diluting the ability for schools to obviously teach in English and focus on American-born, English-speaking students. So it's a great point. Just objectively take the emotion out of it. The fact that all these people here are driving up costs and they're making life more miserable for American citizens.
Yeah, you just think about it. They come here, they drive up the cost of insurance. Now your dollar that had to work or is from Social Security has to compete with free dollars for people that don't belong here. People are, like rent went through the roof, mortgages went through the roof. So many things. They're finding so many, that are abusing emergency rooms, and that's how they're getting the free health care. President Trump is removing all of that, and it's a big deal. Now, one of the big stories that came out this week was about Biden and the fact that now they've been able to prove that this guy knowingly flooded the country with 20 million illegal immigrants. All of his top advisors were telling him this is going to create chaos. the American people are going to hate the Democrat Party. He said, I don't care. And then they all got in line to parrot these talking points that it was good that we were overrun, that there was no problem at the border, that no, they're not getting all of these handouts and thousands of dollars. They're not getting more money in food stamps than most Americans are getting in Social Security. They're not on Medicaid. They're not on Obamacare. They're not in the SNAP program. They're not voting. Then we find out the truth. They've infiltrated all of it because of Biden. Your thoughts on that bombshell story?
Yeah, well, they've been lying the whole time about all of those points. And, you know, for example, there's another story you probably talked about on here with your audience about how they were rushing to get Social Security cards and numbers into the hands of all these illegals. And of course, once you have a Social Security number, it's near impossible to distinguish between, you know, a citizen and someone who's not a citizen anymore. And obviously the purpose of this, it's not a secret probably to your enlightened audience, you and me included, but, you know, this is about demographic change, and it's not about the color of the skin. You know, the left wants to focus on this race issue, like, oh, we want this nation to be a nation of white people. That's not really the point, although it's insane that they would say we want there to be a minority white population in America. That's racist in itself. But this is about bringing in people from the third world who are going to continue to vote for their policies. Because over time, what happens is, you know, the Democrat Party has to replace the constituency that is falling out of love with the party. You're seeing that with the Black community right now. So just a quick historic, you know, example so people understand how the Democrat Party in particular has operated for 100 years. You know, in the earlier, you know, 1900s, basically before we had, you know, the Great Depression, you had a majority of Blacks that were voting for Republicans. And that's obviously because, you know, Republicans weren't trying to hang them by their necks. That's what Democrats supported, right? And Democrats got very smart, and it really was, you know, Lyndon Baines Johnson. When you get into the Civil Rights Act, you know, Republicans have been trying to pass a civil rights legislation, I mean, for 50 years, and Democrats repeatedly blocked it. And we know why, because they were racist. This is the party of the KKK, et cetera. And LBJ, and we know this to be a fact, there's evidence of it, people have talked about it. You know, they devised a plan. Basically, they said, you know, we got to get this civil rights legislation passed, and we've got to rebrand ourselves effectively to become the party of Blacks so that they keep voting for us. And they created the welfare state, and they destroyed the Black family, the Black community, and turned them into, you know, new slaves of the Democrat Party effectively. So what they're doing now is they're seeing that Black people, for example, this is no longer working. Many people have turned against the Democrat Party. And so they're looking at all they're looking at is political power. And so they say, look, we're not going to win elections with American citizens anymore because we're screwing them. So what do we need to do? We need to import foreigners who come here for that welfare. And all they have to do in exchange is vote for us. You know, these are coming from third world countries. They don't believe in democracy. We're not even going to require that they assimilate. They'll just go and live in Dearborn, Michigan. We'll get 80,000 Somalians there. And then we'll start to take, we'll create an unholy alliance with Islam and Muslims, and they'll become Democrats, and we'll elect, you know, so this is all they think about and care about. They are intentionally destroying the country just so they can retain political power.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. In the last few days, we've learned the Somali community in Minnesota has stolen upwards of $8 billion. Now they're saying that they're finding issues in the state of Maine, also in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Governor Tim Walz is in big trouble politically. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar might be as well. But now Tom Holman and President Trump, they are surging ICE into Minnesota. They are going after these people. What they're finding is that nearly 50% of them are illegal. They shouldn't even be here. But let me go ahead and show you in the audience. They're going to be sending in so many different troops.
Shields up and guns drawn, Ring surveillance video shows more than a dozen armed federal agents descending on a Burnsville home on Saturday. A woman who lives there tells Fox 9 multiple Latino people who rent rooms there were arrested by ICE after being followed home from the store. A portion of the video shows one man being taken down in the driveway and another woman running inside to her child. We're told the 4 people taken into custody are now being held in immigration facilities out of state. That includes the parents of a 7-year-old boy.
You shouldn't be rolling around in unmarked vans. People have the right to know who's following them, and you can see there's fear in the people that are getting out of the car in that video.
Former state senator and Lakeville Mayor Matt Little is running to represent this district in Congress. He said he's troubled by what he saw in the video and wants people to know their rights.
They certainly have a right to a hearing. They certainly have a right to a lawyer. They have a right to contact the, people in their lives that could help them out. You have all these rights. So make sure you're showing up and letting your neighbors know that they have rights.
All right. So now going into Minnesota to go after the illegals. They say they're not going to target the Somali community, but if they encounter them and they're here illegally, they are on an airplane back to Africa. Your thoughts? President Trump's gone into Chicago, done great things. He's gone into Memphis, Tennessee. Last week, they went into New Orleans and had amazing success. Your thoughts on what they're doing to round up and remove the illegal immigrants?
I think they can't do it enough or fast enough. They need to keep doing this. Even in that clip from Fox, you hear, the conversation as always, this kid was separated from his parents, or people have a right to know who's following them. I just want to be a straight shooter here. They talk about fear, right? The fear of these illegals, that they're like, as if they shouldn't feel that way. These people should have been feeling afraid from the moment they came here illegally. They should be living in fear every day of their life, not fear of violence from this country, but from fear of being apprehended for their crime, which is illegally entering this country, illegally taking advantage of our welfare state. And I'm really tired of this, call it toxic empathy, of them taking advantage of this kind of emotional storyline to try and suggest that, because they're from another, honestly, it doesn't even make sense. If you look at the way the media and the left reacted to innocent, grandmas that walked into the Capitol building on J6, they could not celebrate enough if they took a 80-year-old woman's face and rammed it on the cement. They would have been celebrating that. Look, they shot Ashley Babbitt, a Capitol police officer. She's the only person who died of unnatural causes. It was gruesome and brutal. An unarmed female who was a veteran got shot dead, and they defended the Capitol police officer. But for crying out loud, you've got illegals who are committing crimes here by being here and then committing crimes on top of that. And you've got ICE agents doing their job, enforcing the law. And I'm supposed to cry tears for these people? No, I won't.
Yeah. At the end of the day, they're not supposed to be here. And whether Biden invited them, I've heard this excuse from Democrats. Well, Biden and Trump may have different philosophies, but they did come here under Biden, and we need to honor that. What do you mean we need to honor that? You've got to go home. And if you self-deport, you can come back. We're a country, we are a melting pot, but not a melting pot of illegals. And so I'm just grateful for what they're doing. Now, Department of Homeland Security released this morning that nearly 50% of people from Somalia are here illegally. Borders Czar Tom Holman announced that he's putting his best investigator on digging into the fraud connection between Ilhan Omar, and he's going to investigate why she married her brother for citizenship. And this may actually have been a crime that she committed. But let me show you in the audience what was said by Tom Holman.
The Border Czar, Tom Holman, joins us tonight to talk about Minnesota as well as a number of other issues. And, sir, it's good to have you back on the show. Trump mentioning the Daily Mail reporting from 2020 that Ilhan Omar married her brother to get into the country. This was last week. Take a listen.
Look at their nation. Look how bad their nation is. It's not even a nation. It's just people walking around killing each other. They've taken billions and billions of dollars. They have a representative, Ilhan Omar, who they say married her brother. It's a fraud.
Calls that a fraud. It's a story that has never been successfully refuted, even though it's now a 5-year-old story. That's clearly a deportable offense. Is there an investigation into that?
I just got advised by a fraud investigator the other day on that. I asked the question, who reviewed the file, and says there was immigration fraud involved. the statute of limitation became an issue in the last 4 years when this was first brought up. Who was president? Who run DOJ? So pulling the records now, pulling the files, and we're looking at, but this fraud investigator, who I know personally, one of the best fraud investigators in HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, said there's no doubt he reviewed the file. So I'm running that down this week, matter of fact, and we'll see.
It's tremendous that, I mean, and according to the Secretary, Kristi Noem of DHS, she said nearly 50% of the visas are fraudulent in this community. I mean, that would mean that half the Somali refugees are here in some way illegally. What's going to happen? Is something actually going to happen? Are there going to be people stripped of their visas, deported? Are we going to see that?
Absolutely. I mean, those days are over. Thank God President Trump's in the White House. We're going to look at all of them. I mean, we're going to look at those here illegally, of course. We're going to look at those here under a visa or some sort of, immigration process that are criminals. We're going to look at the national security threats. But those who came through a process that weren't properly vetted, who didn't provide documentation, who slipped through the Biden's weak processes on, giving visas and temporary, whether student visas or visitors visas or whatever. We're going the whole gamut. President Trump has instructed us go down and we're going to deep dive all of this. And we're going to hold people accountable. So yes, there are going to be multiple deportations coming. Absolutely.
All right. So not only are they here fraudulently, but their documentation is fraudulent. Your thoughts? I mean, Daily Mail, from the United Kingdom, they just broke a story in the last 48 hours. Irrefutable evidence that Ilhan Omar married her brother. Very strange. I covered that in my news broadcast last night. Your thoughts on that? And then Tom Holman saying, under President Trump, we're just going to continue to surge into these blue cities and get the illegals out.
Well, one thing that I just think is astonishing is that this has been known for 5 years, as you heard them say in that clip. I can't think of a much bigger scandal than, a sitting representative in Congress who came here under fraudulent circumstances by marrying her brother. And I just look at the media's reaction to hoaxes about Trump, hoaxes about Hegseth, hoaxes about everything, that even the hoax that they invent isn't even something that's scandalous. And here you have Ilhan Omar marrying her brother to get into this country, and then she becomes a congressperson, and she represents a community that look, they're going to dig into this. How much did she aid and abet this whole thing? I mean, what this whole Somalian refugee situation looks like is, it's a criminal ring. It's like Al Capone. And what they did with the COVID money and everything else. This was facilitated and it was strategic. And so I just, the left is going to do what they do on steroids. Oh, Ilhan Omar is one of us. She's meanwhile, this is somebody who wanted Charlie Kirk's legacy to be left in the dustbin of history, she said. So, I hope your audience and Americans just toughen up and get a spine of steel here, because this has to happen. And all you're going to hear is emotional pleas. And I'm sorry, I agree with the Democrats, Stephen. No one is above the law.
No one is above the law. Charlie Kirk told White House advisor Stephen Miller and President Trump on numerous occasions that reversing Biden's illegal immigrant overthrow of America was crucial, that it had to be a top priority. And I'm grateful that President Trump won, and that is a major focus, and that is going to help with affordability for seniors and everyone. Speaking of Charlie Kirk, you have a new book out honoring him and his ideas. Tell me and my audience about For Christ and Country.
Yeah, For Christ and Country, the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. The genesis of it was actually when I learned and how I learned that he was shot, and then quickly realized that he couldn't have survived it. I was picking up my daughter from her preschool when I got the news, and my wife went to retrieve her. I don't typically pick up my daughter. My daughter was running towards the car, screaming joyfully, Dada's in car. And the juxtaposition, contrast, Stephen, of seeing my daughter running with just, as a parent, like there's just nothing better than that, more rewarding than that. And that was stolen from Charlie's family and his kids in the same instant. And it was instantly relatable. He's not a caricature. I mean, he was a father, he was a Christian, he was a husband, he was a patriot. And I have 2 young daughters that are, roughly his kids' age. And my heart broke, and I cried, Stephen, for a week. I just like uncontrollably, I couldn't control it. And I don't cry. I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm a tough, I don't. And I couldn't understand why, like, how is this affecting me so much? And, I tell people, I was his publicist last summer for second to last book, Right Wing Revolution, but I didn't know him personally. So this isn't somebody who's writing that was like a friend of Charlie Kirk. I'm like millions of people that had this grief. And so that was the genesis of the book, trying to understand that. And then I'm very glad, honestly, I wrote the book at this point because of what I'm observing out there with this effort by prominent people, more and more of them, that are trying to destroy Charlie Kirk's legacy. And, this book is, there's a spiritual component, but it really fights to course correct what's happening in the conservative movement right now, trying to tear each other apart. I mean, we need to continue Charlie Kirk's legacy. He stood boldly against, the left in this country. And I make it clear in this book too, and I hope everyone understands this, the left killed Charlie Kirk. It was their ideology that was responsible for it, just like it was responsible for all of this violence in this country. And it's not symmetrical, the violence. The left likes to pretend it's right wing. No, it's exclusively from the left. And we need to address that and confront it. And so, this book was just something that I felt, I guess, in the end I had to write, because I see this cultural decay that Charlie spoke against, and it's a great threat, a grave threat to this country. And, people of faith out there, especially in particular, Stephen, we have an obligation to speak the truth. It's not compassionate to indulge people's lies, and Charlie would say that. And we have to all become greater advocates for this country. And when Charlie died, the last kind of residual fear in me died as well. Because I've told you before how many close friends I lost, in 2020 in particular, because I lived in Italy and worked for Marc Jacobs, and I was an actor and went to an all-male prep school in Dallas that was very liberal. And so all these friends, called me a Nazi because I voted for Trump in 2020. And so this explains a lot of the mentality of the left too. Why is violence happening in this country? Why is it coming from the left? And so I get into those things and try and explain it as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Such a remarkable young man. There are days where I still wake up and I go, wait a minute, I can't believe that he isn't here. Like, that just seems like such a bad dream. It seems like false information, right? And yet we all saw it with our own eyes, and yet the violence continues, right? Just in the last 48 hours, conservative podcaster Tim Pool had his house shot up. And now he's saying, I'm going to pull out. This is not worth it. I'm not doing my show. He has one of the most successful shows out there. It's just sad. I hate that on the right, we say, let's debate. And on the left, they say, let's kill you. It's just so inappropriate, especially for the group that's supposedly against gun violence. They sure seem to use guns to be violent pretty regularly. I don't know. Your thoughts on Tim Pool? I hope he won't quit. I hope that he can just take a breath and say, my voice matters, and get back into the arena. But at the same time, I've got empathy for him.
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of Americans out there, it's hard to even fathom or comprehend like that happening to you. And I mean, I hope people can understand it to a certain extent. I mean, this is a guy who he's like you or me. He's much more successful than me in that realm, but he talks to people for a living, and his life is under threat. I mean, and by the way, I know I put people on that show before as a publicist, and it's an undisclosed location that you get taken to when you do an interview there. I mean, eventually the secret gets out, but it's just like, this can't happen in this country anymore. And I'm sick of it. And it's only happening to, people on the so-called right, and the left invents these manufactured fraudulent info trying to say that, right-wing extremism is the only threat to it doesn't exist. I mean, they'll take a bar fight in some town where two neo-Nazis knock each other out or kill each other, and they'll put that in the Anti-Defamation League report, and a transgender killer shoots up, Covenant High School or some other thing, and their manifesto reads like an Obama speech or a Biden speech or a segment on CNN, and that doesn't even go in there as ideological violence. So this is how they cook the book. So I explain that in here as well, but like, I'm sick of this. They say words are violence. Charlie Kirk's words were violence, but then, it's righteous to use actual violence to silence that voice permanently. And what I'm most tired of, Stephen, and what I really address, one of the critical things I address in this book, and I don't really mince words, like I don't mince words on your show either, is that, there's never any accountability from the left. I mean, they basically make a target out of people. It happens. And they always try and escape accountability. I mean, they say what they say about ICE agents, and the same week or a few days after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, somebody in Dallas tried to assassinate a bunch of ICE officers at a facility. I mean, when are we going to actually address this as a nation? And that conversation has to come from us with force, with the force of our words. We can't let this go. And I'm so disturbed, frankly, by how the plot has been lost after Charlie Kirk's assassination. The left basically got away unscathed when this was a ideological leftist who was, baptized into the most militant part of the left, which is the transgender movement at this point. And, they never stop. I mean, the president of the United States, you've really had two that we know of attempted assassination attempts. One, grazed his ear. The other, they caught the guy at his golf club. But you would think there'd be some introspection, right? Like if every day you call somebody a threat to democracy, a fascist, a Nazi, Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, and then somebody tries to kill them and it's the president of the United States, and then there's another plot, and then Charlie Kirk's assassinated because you say the same things about him, and then an ICE agent, people try to kill them, and then a National Guardsman is killed by, a Muslim refugee that came in under Biden, another innocent American, a woman killed. Like, how can this just keep happening? We just pretend like we don't know why. We know why. I make the comparison between, 9/10 when Charlie Kirk was killed and 9/11, and the ideology of the left is not dissimilar to the ideology of jihadists.
Yeah. And it continues. I don't know if you saw this, but just on Sunday night, Ilhan Omar did an interview where she said Stephen Miller is a white supremacist and a Nazi on live TV. This is a Jewish man that you're comparing to a Nazi just because he has different ideology on how to run the country, just because he called out the fact that your community has stolen $8 billion of American money, just because it's now been exposed that you married your brother. Like, this is sick behavior. And yet then they go on live TV. The mainstream media didn't say, hey, we're not going to let you call people Nazi. That's what the mainstream media needs to do. Anytime that happens, they go, hey, whoa, wait a minute. You're disrespecting this person by calling them a Nazi. You're also watering down the evil of Nazis. So stop it. We're not going to let you on our program. But they don't. They sit there and they, gather their documents and do nothing. I mean, it's a travesty. Let me end on just some good news that just broke while you and I were on. According to Rasmussen reports, President Trump had a single overnight approval last night, 53%, up 2 points in the last 5 days. So the messaging about affordability, about getting these criminals stealing our money, killing our citizens out of the country, the focus on America first, good things. As we head into 2026, are you optimistic about what Trump is going to be able to get done? I mean, we're not even 1 year in to what he is doing, and the country already feels like a different place.
Yeah, it does. If you ignore the media's propaganda, certainly. Yeah, I think that people need to understand and realize that he's been there in there a short amount of time, and he hasn't had a lot of help, to be honest. The Senate Republicans right now, that's what I'm most concerned about going forward, because there's so many confirmations that haven't been made, and they're affecting his ability to do what he promised to do, which was, for example, prosecute criminals, for actual crimes committed, not just going on a witch hunt for, Russian collusion and many other things that Democrats have done. And these things are holding up his agenda. But that aside, I mean, I have to say thank you to the president, because he continues to fight hard. He doesn't show any signs of slowing down. He's really in a groove, and we do owe him a debt of gratitude. But again, I issue that praise with the caveat that if Republicans don't get their act together, if we don't continue to put pressure on Senate Republicans and House Republicans, if we don't keep our majorities in the midterms, it's basically over. So this midterm election, you better treat it like you treated the presidential election. That's how important this midterm is.
Yeah. If you don't believe Trump is on the ballot, then you've not been paying attention to the news. If we do not keep the majority, he will lose power. They will impeach him. This will become a different country within a matter of days. So it's extremely important that we go out and support him and the MAGA movement. Drew, thank you so much for coming on. I always like having these conversations, getting your insight. I hope the book is an incredible success. Christ and Country, I'm going to put a direct link down below, as well as a direct link to your Substack and your show so that people can check it out. We'll have you on again in the future. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Stephen. God bless you, brother.